Hello. So in this video, we're actually going to be developing a simple calculator application. So what does the application do basically? We're going to be developing it using like Dart and Flutter. So what does it do basically? It has a form where you can enter two numbers, number one and number two, and you can either add, multiply, subtract, or divide, right? Then you can go to the about screen, and then you see the about of the application, and then you go back to the home page of the application, right, where you can actually use the calculator functionality. So for us to get started, let's first create our Flutter application. But before we do that, as you can see, I've already set up my device here. I'm using a physical device, so please do watch the video on installing and setting up Flutter um for your device for your computer. But I have this already up and running. I've set it up, so create the new I'm going to create the new Flutter application. So let me use my command prompt. And for this, before you watch this video, I strongly recommend you watch the video on that introduction, that programming, if you don't already know that, and then installing and setting up Flutter on a computer. If you've never done that, you find you don't have any idea on that before you can step into this video. And if you've already done that, then it's fine. You can get right to this video. So I'm going to go to my documents directory. That's where my desktop. That's where I want to create the application. There's a folder there. So I'll just go there, and I have these as the users, as a desktop, I believe, desktop, as a Rose Valley Academy, and Flutter project. All right, I think this user slash, keep forgetting this thing. Okay, let me just get that out. Flutter projects. All right. Oh, yeah, gotten that now. Believe it should be this RV. Don't think I need this. Yep, I need that. Okay, so user. All right, so to create a new Flutter project, right? So I use the Flutter command, Flutter, right? And I would say create, and then I would say the name of the Flutter project. So I'll call it calculator app, right? And it's going to create the Flutter application. So while we're waiting for it to create the Flutter application, I'm just going to pause the video until it's done, then I'll resume when it's done. Alright, so as you can see, it has created the Flutter application. So I can go to the directory and run the Flutter application, but I want to open it in VS Code, right? So I can actually close this, and I'll just go to my Visual Studio. Alright, so minimize this, go to my Visual Studio, and then you can see it is already in the Flutter projects application on my desktop. Just minimize this. Then I'll come over here, I'll say this file, open folder, and open this calculator app folder. So so this is it, right? So I'm going to explain them briefly. Just explain some of the folders, right? So this has to do with developing for Android, right? So you don't really have to touch any of this folder, and the only folder we're going to be working with is this one for now, for the sake of this project, unless along the line. But for now, we're going to be working on this. But this has to do with developing apps for Android. This has to do with for iOS. This has to do with developing for Linux. This has to do with developing for Mac OS. This has to do with developing for the web applications. This has to do with developing for Windows, right? Then this pubspec.yaml file, as I call it, right? It has to do with installing packages that your application uses, right? So, but when you create a new, this is what we're going to write in most of all our code, right? So this is what we're going to be writing. So this is the basic application that gets that comes with Flutter when you create a new Flutter application, but we're actually going to like create from scratch. So I'm just going to rename this and put this, and then I'll say yes, and then I'll create a new file here. I'll say main.dart. So for every new Flutter application, for Flutter applications, basically the main.dart file is the entry point of the program. So let's put it that way. So Flutter expects your Flutter applications to have that main.dart file, for the entry point of the Flutter application, right? So so let's quickly run this. Let's start developing the Flutter application app, right? So the first thing we need to do is we need to import the material. We need to import the material package, right? So how do we do that? We say package, right? And we say Flutter. We say material .dart, right? So we're going to be using material, which is Google's because although this is an app development course, but we're primarily focusing on Android, developing for Android, but it's generally an app development course that you can use to the knowledge that you gain from here is a very good starter if you want to develop for other devices too, right? Because one code base, that's the idea of Flutter, and develop for several devices, but it's primarily on Android. So material.dart is from Google that you can use to develop applications that you can see that look like the Android design, right? Native design, right? So we need to import this package for us to be able to have access to those classes and everything that we can use to develop applications that look like that, right? So the next thing we're going to have is the void main, right? And if you watch the Dart video, or if you already have understanding of that, the main function is the entry point of the program, right? So there's a particular function called run app that is going to kickstart the application. So we have run app, and then when we do that, we're going to call the class that we actually want to create, right? So basically this is how Flutter works. This is how I like to explain things on Flutter. So Flutter, there are two types of widgets. There is stateful widgets and there are stateless widgets. So stateful widgets are the kind of widgets, when you have a screen on an app that let's say for instance, have you ever okay, let's give an example of let's talk about view profile, like when you have a page that you can view your profile, right? So on that page you're not really updating anything. So once you have a screen that is not really going to update anything on the screen, then you would say it's a stateless widget, right? But once you have a screen that is going to update something, say maybe you have a button that when you click on the button, it's going to be incrementing the number of times that button has been clicked, and it's going to be showing the number of times you click the button. Then it's going to be a stateful widget because that widget is actually going to get updated, right? So that is that. So then we have components. So components on an application, basically, this is how I like to explain them. When you have an application, right, you have the buttons you see, right? You have the pop-up that comes up whenever there's an error or something like that. You have the icon that loads in the middle when something is loading. Those can be said to be components, so to say, right? Like you can explain that to be components. So whenever you need any of those components, they are actually on the Flutter documentation, and let me quickly show you that, right? So you know that they're on the Flutter documentation. So let's see, Flutter components, right? Let's see, let's quickly show you that. All right, this is for material app, right? So let me just click widgets, I believe. Let me see. All right, so this is if you want to design applications that look like for iOS devices, right, and macOS. This is what you basically use, right? But if you want to design applications that look like Android, they have material tree design specifically. This is what we use. So if I click on this and I open it in a new tab, so you can see basically all those things I talked about. So these are all like components, so to say, yeah, widgets, but you can call them like components too, right? So that you can use to make your application, right? So you can see all these things. So whichever one you want, once you click on it, it's going to give you the code that you can actually use to do that, right? Like if you look, if I click on navigation bar, right, I see a code, right, that it's going to give me that I can actually use to do what I want to do. So I'm just trying to show you all of this so that you will know that they actually exist. Um, Whenever you're developing, how you can come get code you want to use right from the Flutter documentation. So it's just taking a bit of time to load, but literally that's how it works. Yeah, so it gives you the code and it shows you how you can actually use some explanations, right? And it even has video, but it's taking quite some time to load the code. So that's how you can actually pick up some of those things, right, and use them for your Flutter application. So I'm just gonna leave that there, and then we'll go back to our application. So whenever you need any of those kind of things, you can go there and get them. So we're going to keep developing our application, right? And then let me bring this up. All right, so let's see. All right, so let's keep developing that. So basically, so run app is going to, run the application and display something to the users, right? That's how we can put that. So for us to display something, we have to actually display either a stateful widget or a stateless widget. And in this case, we're going to be displaying we're going to display a stateless widget, right? And that's what I want to do here. I want to display a stateless widget because that stateless widget, all it's going to do is just initialize the material components, right? Like set the the blueprint that, okay, we're trying to create an application that looks like that has material looks like the Android kind of look, right? And then okay, this hasn't still come up, but that's how that works. The Android kind of looks, and that's what we want. So for us to do that, we're going to create a stateless widget, right? So but I'm going to call that stateless widget my app. So I'll write my app here, and it's going to be a class, right? But it's complaining of that because we haven't actually created the my class. So my app. So but for us to create the my app right now is a class, right? That is a stateless widget. So we have my app, and we say extends stateless widget, right? So you can see that error there has actually kind of gone, right? And then I'm going to have the constructor, and the constructor is just going to inherit properties of the of its parent class. So we'll say let's make it a const my app. Please we strongly recommend that you have good knowledge in that or basic knowledge in Dart programming before you come to this video. If you don't understand, you've set up Flutter on your computer. If you haven't done all of that, please watch the video on Dart programming and then watch the video on how to set up Flutter on your computer, right? So we'd say const my app, right? And we'd say super.key, saying what it means, we're basically trying to inherit properties of the parent class, right? And then we are going to have an override. And why are we having an override? Because we're trying to override the build method, right? So every stateless widget needs to have a build method that builds something, right? That's what is going to be built on the screen. So we would say, and it returns a widget, right? So we say widget build, right? And when we say widget build, we would say build context, right? And we say context. You can see this here, it's complaining of this. All right. So the build is having an issue simply because whenever you see red on Visual Studio Code, what it means is that there's an error, right? And then basically how I like to explain this blue is it's still going to run, but it's just like it's trying to suggest to you like, hey, there might be a way that you could write this thing and it's going to improve performance, something like that. So if I put the const keyword here, it's going to increase performance, right? And all of that. So we're going to return a material app, right? So these are all gotten from the material.dat. They're all in there, right? So we're going to return material, we're going to return material app, trying to specify that we're creating material app, and we're ending with semicolon. So we're going to set certain things. We're going to set the title of the app. I'm going to call this calculator app, the title of the material app, and then we're going to set a theme, right? So this theme we use theme data. So right, this is like a basic way of explaining theme, right? Theme is like the way your app should look across the board. Okay, let's give an example. WhatsApp, for those who are familiar with WhatsApp, like it's an application that primarily uses green, white colors. So if it's the light theme, then if it's a dark theme, you have green and black colors. But everybody knows that WhatsApp, one of the main colors of WhatsApp is the green color, right? So something like that. So across the application, you will find out that you see a lot of green, right? So that is what theme data is all about. Right there, you can actually set like some kind of like theme that the app would use across board, right? Yeah, something like that. So, and then I'm going to set this color scheme, right? And I'm setting this color scheme. I'm using color scheme, and I'm going to say from C. That's basically what I'm using, right? And I'm going to set the seed color, right? I'm setting the seed color, and I'm going to say color dot deep purple. So I want to use, okay, let's use deep purple. So I literally want deep purple to be like the theme color across the application. I could decide to change that later, but for the time being, that's what I want to use, right? So having said that, then there's another thing I want to set. I want to set use material tree. So basically what this means is, it's like saying it's complaining of an error because I didn't put comma here. Do you want it to use material tree? Yes, I do want it to use material tree, right? So that's what that means. And then there's the last thing that there's something else is missing. I'm going to set the home. So this is more like saying, hey, I want to use material. I want the app. This whole thing here is like saying, hey, I want this thing to use like a material design, right? But I want the first page that loads to be what I'm about to put now in the home. And I'm going to say the first page that loads is going to be my home page, right? My home page. But you notice that it's complaining of the my home page, like there is no my home page. And why is it complaining of that? It's complaining because it doesn't currently exist. So we're going to create it. But there's something I want to do. I want to be created, but I want it to be on a separate file, right? I don't want to cloud this entire file, put everything on the main.dat. I want to structure my application to have different files. So I would come here and I would say new file, and I would say my homepage.dat, right? And then I have that there, right? My homepage.dat, and I'm going to have that there, right? Or let me just call it let me say calculator page, because we're going to have an about page. So I will say calculator page .dat, right? And then here I'm going to change it to I'll change it to calculator page .dat. So for me to be able to use that file, this is what we're going to write the files, the entire thing for the calculator, right? But for me to use that, I'm going to import it here, and I will say import, and I will put calculator page .dat, right? So it's now, but this is still showing red because we haven't written anything inside of here. So let's go ahead and write something, right? So we're actually going to write the calculator page. So this page is going to be a stateful widget, because the way the calculator application is going to work is when you input number 1, input number 2, you click add, subtract, multiply, divide. It's going to perform those operations and show the result, right? So and then it's going to do some check to say, hey, if you didn't enter something, please enter something, or something like that, some error checking. So it's going to be a stateful widget because the screen is going to be updating, unlike something like a view profile screen or an about screen where it's just going to show you the about of the app. There's nothing really changing on the screen, right? So how do we get that up and running, right? So we're still going to import package right? Material dot package flutter slash material dot. Now we are actually going to create. We're going to create the stateful widget, right? So we're going to say class, right? Class calculator page, right? Calculator page extends stateful widget. And then when we do this, right, we're going to create the constructor, and then we'll say calculator page, right? And also we're going to say it's going to inherit properties, of the other of its parent class. And then when we've done that, we have to create the state, right? So we have the stateful widget and we have the state. So we have the state is what we're going to be implementing code for the stateful widget. That's but that's how stateful widgets work. So you can see that here we have a stateless widget, and you also have a state we're going to create. But for stateful widgets, you actually have to create a state. So how do we create a state, right? So we're going to override what we initially had, and we'll say state, right? Calculator page, right? State calculator page, and we're going to use the create state function, right? So when we do that, this is an arrow function. We're going to make it an arrow function, and we are going to make the page state to be, we're going to use a private, we're going to set it to be private, right? So we'll say calculator page state, right? And then what are we going to implement it? So we're going to implement it down. So we are going to say class underscore calculator page state extends state, right? Extends state. So, and then we're going to pass in the stateful widget. I'm going to say calculator page, right? And then we're going to do that, and then we have this, right? So basically, when you're creating a stateful widget, you have the stateful widget, right? But you have to create the state, and that's what this state is here, right? And then when you create the state, you have this. You actually have to now come here and implement whatever it is that is going to have. So in this case, we're going to do something first. First things first, we're going to let's see what we currently have, right? Let's see what we currently have. Let's say okay. So, but before we actually start implementing the build and everything, we have to first do things. So we have to okay, let's initialize the build, right? So override. So the build is what is going to show to the users, right? So override, and we're going to say widget build, and we'll say build context, right? And then when we do this, let's return scaffold. So we're going to show you what scaffold is, right? But while we're returning the scaffold, let's return scaffold, and then let's have an app bar. So I will show you all of this as it looks on the app. Let's have an app bar, and we'll say app bar, right? And then we set the title for the app bar, right? So that's what's going to be displayed here when the app loads, something like that. And then we'll say calculator app, and then we are actually going to set the body. Sorry. So we set the app bar, and we're setting the title, right? Sorry, the title actually takes about that. The title takes a widget. It takes a text widget, right? And then we're going to say calculator app. And since it's not going to be changing over time, it's going to remain the same. So I just put a const here. right? And we say body, but in this case, let's just put a center. Let's use a center that centralizes text on the screen, and we'll just say its child is going to be a text. And let's just say hello. So we'll see what we've done so far. And let's use a const here because it's not changing. Okay, not there. Const here. Right. So by the time I save this, right, I click on this, I click on file, terminal, new terminal. So let's see what we have so far on the application running. So we'll say Flutter run, and because I have my device already connected, right, so it's going to run on my device. It's going to build on my device. So what's going to happen is I'm going to pause this video until it has eventually built to save time. Alright, so we can see the application after it's run, and we can see it. So we can see the calculator app, right? This is the app bar here, right? And we can see the hello text right here at the center, right? Center is center. So essentially what happens, so when the application comes up, right, this takes effect, this, it goes into this, it runs this, right? So when it runs that, it looks at this and says, hey, I'm trying to run this, right? And when it does that, let's put a const here. And when it essentially does that, it goes and looks for the calculator page because we already have this here. And it says, well, where's the calculator page? And this is it. And then it says, hey, I want a scaffold, right? Scaffold is this that has the app bar and then this body. And I want the app bar to be this and I want the body to be this. So let's just say the background color for the app bar. We'll say background color and we'll say colors dot black. Right? And when I hit R, it just reloads that screen, right? But if I press shift R on terminal, it like restarts the entire application. So for this text here, I'm just gonna do something. I'm gonna make it white because look, so we say style to make it white. We use the style, we set the style, and we say, right, we say text style, and I can say colors dot white. So when I come down here and I hit R, it makes that white. So that takes care of that, right? So basically that we can see there. But what we want essentially, we want a form that has two inputs, right? And then you can input them and you can click add, subtract, multiply, and divide, right? So let us actually do that. Let's have our form, right? So let's have our form, and for us to have the form, we basically need to set quite some things first before we can have the form. So first things first, we need to set, right? We need to set there's something called text editing controllers. So those text editing controllers are ways that we can actually access whatever the person inputs in number 1 and number 2, right? So I'm going to create something. I'll use the keyword late and I will say text editing controller, right? Late in the sense that we're going to initialize it, in a few lines now. We're not initializing it as we're typing it there, and then we're not setting the values as we're typing it there. And I would say I want it to be private controller 1, alright, and I'll just copy this and paste it. So this will be for the second input, right? So how do we initialize it? Well, and then before we initialize it, every form needs a form key, right? So I'm going to have a form key and I'm going to create a con key. Final, make it private, form key, right? I'll say equal to global key, right? And I say form state. When I do that, that handles that. So I actually have to initialize them, right? So I'm going to initialize them in a method called init states, right? So init states is basically like where you can initialize things before anything gets built and shown on the screen, right? So I'll use the override, and when I use that, I'd say void init state. And when I say init state, right, now I'm actually going to initialize the controller 1. I'll say controller 1 equal to text editing controller, right? And then I'll do the same thing for controller 2, right? Controller 2. So those two things are needed for us to be able to access whatever the person is going to input in the form, right? But before we do all of these, I want to do something. I want to specify super.initState, right? So run whatever init state is in the class's inheriting form, right? And then we come down here. So then I also want to dispose. So the dispose method is much like you can use it to get rid of variables when they're no longer in need. That's like a very basic way of explaining it, right? So I'll override, and then I'll just delete this, don't need this. And then I'll say void dispose, right? And I would call the controller dot dispose, and I'll replicate the same thing for number 2. So that's what it is. And then I'll say super dot dispose, right, to run the dispose method of the class inheriting form. So let's get to creating the form, right? So if I want to create the form, basically I'm going to do something. Let's create the form. So this is what I want to do. Now I'm going to have a column here, right? Column. I want to have a column. So column is basically some what you can use to like stack elements, vertically one after the other, right? So that's what the column is. So I'd say column, right? And then the children are the components you want to stack one after the other. So I basically want to stack a form, right? So I'm going to have a form, right? So I have a form. I want to have this form, right? I'll have the form, and it's still going to take a column of children because we're going to have two inputs, input 1 and input 2, right? So I'm going to have it here, and I'm going to enter that. But before I do that, I want to specify the key. The key of the form is going to be the form key that we created up here, right? You can see that here, form key that we created up here. So that's going to be the key of the form, right? And then provide the constant value. Oh, sorry about it, because of this. That sorts that out. So what is the child? So the child is going to be a column because I want to still have like input 1 and input 2. I'll say column. And when I say column, I'll say children, right? I'll say column, and I'll say children. So we're going to have a text form field, right? Because that's what we're going to use to get input from the user. And we're going to now specify the controller that we can use to access whatever the person entered. So controller would specify the controller. So this is the first number that the person is going to enter, number 1, right? This is number 1 that the person is going to enter. Before we even have this, I would like to do something. I'd like to have a text that says, okay, there's already calculator up okay, a point for this. Opening point for this. So this is going to be the number one that the user is going to enter, right? And I'm going to set a decoration for it. And when I'm setting the decoration, it's a const keyword because it's not going to change. I'll say input decoration, right? And I'll set the label. So basically this will be the label of the text view, and it's going to take a text widget, and it's going to be number 1. That's what it's going to be, right? Number 1. And then I'm definitely going to I'm just going to copy and paste the same thing for the second number that the user is expected to enter. So I would say controller 2, and I'll give this number 2, right? So once I'm done with that, then I'm going to have something here. So once I'm done with that, I'm going to actually set I'm going to set I'm done setting the number one form input and number two form inputs, right? So basically I now want to have the buttons. So we're going to have 4 buttons, right? I'm going to have add, subtract, multiply, and divide. So those buttons are going to come after this form, right? So that's where those buttons are going to come. So we can use the same way we can use column to stack components of widgets like vertically one after the other. We can use row to stack them horizontally one after the other, and they work the same way. Literally they work the same way. So I would say row, now say children, right? So I'll specify the elements, the widgets, the children, and I want buttons, right? Clickable buttons. So elevated button is something I can use to set clickable buttons, and you can see it's completed that for me, right? So the child is what is going to show, like the one on the button, right? So in this case, I'm just going to have a text, right, as a child. I'm just going to have a text, and what does the text say? The text is going to say plus, right? So that would handle add, right? Plus, and I'll say const. So I'm going to let me get this right. So and on pressed, let's show this, right? Let's just put now first. Now. Alright. So let's look at what our app actually looks like so far, right? If I refresh this page, we're gonna have an error. Not be initialized, controller 1, that's not be initialized, controller 2, controller 1, controller 2. Alright, so let's look at it. Let's run this. Use Shift R. Let me see if I start the application. Alright, so restarting the application fixed all of that. So that was all. So we can see that we have number 1, right? We have number 1, and we can enter number 1, and we can enter number 2, and this is the button that we have there for the addition. But right now the button can't do anything because we put a null. So when you put a null for onPress is what should happen once. It's a function that what happens once the button is clicked, right? So we're going to write some functionality for that right now. So once somebody actually clicks on the addition button, right? So it's going to create a new variable, and we'll say variable number 1, and we're going to get what the person imputed as number 1. That's what we're having dot text, right? So controller 1 dot text, right? And then we'll do the same thing for number 2. So when the person clicks on add, right, it's supposed to check, okay, let's get what the person imputed as number 1 and number 2. And when it gets that, first things first, we're going to check, right, did the person supply an empty we're going to check. We want to do things. We want to ensure that the person supplied something actually, right? So if the person supplied something, that's what we're really going to calculate. But if the person did not supply anything, then we tell the person to supply something. So I want a text here that would show the results of the addition or an error depending on the case, right? So if we say text, right? We say text, and then we can put the text, right? So we can just say let's just put a variable, and we'll say result text, right? Result text. So we're going to create a result text here, and this result text is going to be empty. Result text is going to be of type string, and it's going to be empty, right? And say equal to this. So once that has been done, you can see that error is out. This is what it's going to show. It's going to show in between it's going to show in between. It's going to show in between number 2 here and this, right? So it's going to show the results there or the error, regardless, depending on the situation. So what do we do in this case? So when we've done this, now we're going to check, and we say if either number 1, if number 1 is empty or number 2 is empty, right? So it should show an error to the user. So I'm going to talk about set state now. So what is basically set state? Set state is what we can use to let Flutter know that, okay, we are trying to update a variable's value or something on the Flutter application, and we want the users to take note of what has been updated, so that that part of the application that needs updating will be updated. So in this case, if number 1 or number 2 is empty, we want an error message to show in between these two things here. So we have to notify the user that something is wrong, so the user can know. So I would use the set state, right? And then I would say result text equal to please enter the 2 numbers, and that takes care of that, right? So if we actually let's try that and see if that is working. If I restart the application, and then let's see, right? So if I click on this, you can see please enter the 2 numbers because they are actually empty, right? And I'll make these caps, right? So but that would refresh. Let's see. So if I tap this, you can see that please enter the 2 numbers. All right. So but what if the person supplied something? What about if the person supplied the 2 numbers, right? So we'll now say else if the person actually supplied the 2 numbers, right? So we're going to check, right? So we want to ensure that the person actually entered numbers and is not alphabets or some other stuff the person entered. So before we do that, I'd like to create a function, right? So I'll create a function that would handle that functionality, that would help us to actually check if the person entered a number or not, right? So how do I do that? So I'm going to create a function up here, and I want it to be called isNumeric, right? So I want that function to be isNumeric. So I'm going to come up here and I'm going to name it isNumeric, that checks to ensure, hey, this person actually entered in an actual number. And I would say bool is going to return a type bool is numeric, right? And it's taking a string because whatever the person supplies on the text, right? Whenever somebody enters something on the form, it usually comes in as string. So we'll have to convert that string to numbers. But we have to check if whatever this person supplied is actually a number. So what this function is going to do is it's going to check, right? It's going to try and convert what the person entered to like a double. So if it was successful in converting it to a double, then it's probably a number, right? But if it was not successful, then most likely the person didn't enter a number. So we'll return double dot try pass, right? And then we'd say the string supplied, I would say if it's equal to null, right? And we do that. So that is going to handle that. So basically what this is saying is, if whatever we supply in the isNumeric is going to try and convert it to a double, and if it was unsuccessful, then it's just going to return false. If it's successful, it's going to be true, right? And then we're going to use that in our code for the addition, right? So we have it here, and we're going to use that for our code for the addition. So how do we do that basically, right? So first things first, we're going to check, right? If the person supplied number 1 and number 2, we're going to ensure the person entered the number. So if right, if the first number 1, if number 1 is not a number, is not numeric, or number 2 is not numeric, if either of the two are not numeric, right? So we're going to show a message to the user saying, hey, right? Hey, please enter only numbers. You see that, right? But if the person supplied something that is actually, numbers, right, then we're going to convert the numbers to double so that we can use that to do the calculation, right? So we'll pass the numbers, right? Pass the numbers. Okay, so when we pass the numbers, we'll say double num1 equal to double dot pass number1. We're going to pass number1. I would say double num2. So we're converting the two entered numbers since they are actually numbers, right? But they will be entered as strings. So, but it checks the strings if they are numbers. If they are numbers, fine. Then it proceeds to convert them to actual numbers that we can use to work with. Because when you're imputing something, it usually enters as string, right? So I would say pass number2, right? So when we do this, right, then once we've done that, we're going to actually calculate the results, and let's say double result, since this addition is equal to num1 plus num2, right? But here's the catch, right? I actually want to show, because this right now the result is actually of type double, right? So it's not of type string. So I want it to show I would like to convert it to string, right? But I want to do something. If you're adding 3 plus 3, right, it's supposed to give 6, right? So but if you're adding 3.2 plus 3, it's supposed to be 6.2, right? But if we're converting, if the person entered 3 and 3, right, it's going to now convert it to double, 3.0 then 3.0. So what we want is, we want whatever has been as the result. If it doesn't have any decimal numbers, it's just going to display it as an integer, right? It's going to show it like as though it's an integer. But if it has decimal numbers, then it's going to display it as decimal, right? So that's basically what we're trying to do now, right? So the result we are actually going to show to the people, right? So we're going to say result text, right, is equal to result. So it's going to check, hey, does this result have decimal numbers, right? So if basically, so that's what it means. Hey, this means I want the result text to be equal to something, right? So it's going to check this condition. Is this condition true, right? If it basically doesn't really have like any decimal numbers, right, then it should just save it as an integer, right? So it's going to convert it to integer, right? And then it's going to convert it back to string, because we're trying to show string to the users. We're not trying to show integer to the users, right? So that's this. But other than that, right, it's just going to show it as it is, right? Decimal number, and that's what that is going to be. Let's take that again, right? If what the person entered, for instance, if the person entered 3.1 plus 3, right? So it's going to check 3.1 plus 3 is 6.1. So if eventually that thing has decimal, right, it's just going to save it as decimal and show to the user. But if it doesn't have decimal, it's 3 and 3 the person entered, then it's just going to convert it to integer and then just show it as 6 instead of showing 6.1 and 6.0. But if it's 3.1 and 3 the person entered, 3.1 plus 3 is 6.1, then it's going to show as 6.1, right? So that's what that's going to be. But we have to ensure the user gets to see it. So what do? We actually we put it in a set state, right? So if you don't put it in a set state, the user will not get to see the state updated on the screen. So we put it in a set state and we say this, right? So once that does that, it's going to show, right? So let's give it a shot and see what happens, right? But the result text now we have basically want to show, right? Dots to string, and then would say so, and then we'd say result text is equal to the result is, right, and we'd say plus result text, right? So that essentially shows the results to the user, right? So that essentially shows the results to the user. believe this should even, let's see, this should even be all right. So with this dollar sign here, we can actually just put this here and it's going to literally work. So let's give it a shot and let's see how that goes, right? So we'll start the application. So once that has been done, let's actually enter something. So we say let's see D and we click this. Please enter the two numbers, right? And let's click another D here. Please enter only numbers, right? So let's put 3 and let's put 5 and we say add. The result is 8. So let's put 3.1 here, right? The result is 8.1. So we're going to replicate this for I will change here to const. So we're going to replicate this for subtraction, multiplication, and division, but I want this to be in the middle. So let's see main axis dot center. I think that should set it in the middle, right? Let's just see that. All right. So with this we can set the row, right? The items in the row to the middle. So let's just copy all of these and we'll do that the same for subtract, multiply, and divide, right? So let's just copy this. So we'll say 2, right? And then we'll put here 3, and then we'll put 4. So let's go up, right? So this is add, and we would say here subtract, right? So here is going to be subtraction minus, and we'll say the result is this. And we're going to change this to subtraction symbol, and then we're going to change this to, let's put X for multiplication, right? And then I will change here to multiply. That's for multiplication. And I'm going to change here to, you know, slash division, and I'll change here to divide, right? And then I'll save that, and then I hit run here. Let's open this, and then I hit run. And once I hit run, let's see. So we have all of that, right? So by the time we put let's see 3, we say this, and then this, and then this, right? So we can see all of that is currently working there, right? So but now we want to have an about page that will, like, when somebody clicks on let's say an icon here, icon, it's going to take us to the about page, and then when the person clicks home, it brings us back to this place, right? So how do we do that? Let's create our about page, right? So it's a new file. I would say about dot, right? And then we import, right? We have this we're going to use a a stateless widget because it's not going to do anything. So it's not going to update any stage like material. And then we would have class about extends stateless widget, right? So when we do that, const about, right, which is the constructor, it's a super.key, right? And we're going to have the build widget override, and then we say widget, right? Build. We're going to have the build function, sorry, method. I would say build context, and then we're going to return scaffold, and while returning scaffold, we're going to have app bar. I would say app bar, right? I would say background colors dot black. And then we would say title is going to take a text. I would say calculator app, right? We're going to have actions, right? So there's something called actions that gives us the ability to add those in the app bar. add those buttons that we want. So we see actions, and I want to have an icon button, an icon that is clickable, right? Icon. So we'll say icon button, and then we have the icon here. So we have the icon, and then when you press it, what happens? So let me first set the icon. So I would say icons dot, I would say icons dot home. So basically this is going to be a home icon that will just take us back to the home when you click on it, when you're on the about page. And then for this, it's going to have navigator dot push. So what does navigator dot push replacement does? So it's a way for me to be able to go back, to go to any route I want on my page, right? So when I click on the about page, when I click on the home button, it takes me to the calculator page. And then on the calculator page, when I click on the calculator page, when I actually click on the icon, the eye icon is going to take me to the about, right? And then material page route, right? So it's going to take me to the page, calculator page, right? Yeah, that does that. Say const, I believe that is it. So let's import. Okay, it's already there, calculator page, right? And that imported that because of that, but I don't want it to be imported like this, so I want it to be imported like this, right? And then we have an error here, so let's get that. Okay, here, and then we get rid of this here, and then we say builder function, builder context. What's that one? I think it should be builder, then you say context. No. Alright, let's see. Now let me just get that navigator dot push replacement. Let's just get that out. Navigator dot push replacement. Context. Just try and get that stuff out. So navigator dot push replacement. Just get that stuff out. So it's coming. So yep. Okay. Not this. Let me see. It should give me this, right? Okay. Let me see. I saw something here. All right. So let me look at this, and then I'll see. Try and get that. See, push replacement. And I'm not trying to use named. I'm trying to just use a regular 4 or 5. No, not that. Alright, so let me see. Alright, yes, so this is what I missed. Right, so let me come back to the application. So we have this, and yep, and I'll say calculator app the page. So when I click on, I put a const here. So and then I put a const here. So basically, when I const, it means that it's not really going to change over time, and improves performance test is not changing, right? So what this means is that when I click on the home, it's going to take me to this about page, and then this about page is actually going to have a body, right? So I'll have body here. Let's see. Abba. I'll have body, and I'll just have a center text, right? That says child I'm just gonna have a text in the middle that says okay, not in the middle, that's not be in the middle. Just have a text, right? So what does the text say? It's just gonna say simple calculator app, right? Let's just have that that takes two numbers, right? Then and either adds, subtracts, multiplies, or divides them. Then yeah, so I'm going to copy this and then I'm going to paste it on the okay. This should be, I should set the color here, and then I'll say colors dot white, because you know the background color of the aba is black. So I'm just going to copy all these actions here from here down to here. I'm just going to copy it, and then I'll come to this calculator page and I'm going to paste it here, right? No, not there. I'll paste it here. So in this case, instead of having home, basically going to have info, so for something that would show like an about, and then let's see what it looks like. So when I hit run here, so you can see that there's an eye there, right? So when I tap on the eye, you can see that oh, the eye is loading the same page. So I'm going to say about, right? And then it's complaining that there's no about. I'll come here and I'll say import about, import dot about dot dart, right? And I refresh this, right? So when I tap this, you can see it takes me here. Let's see that about page. This is supposed to be just copy. I'll just go ahead and copy what we have here. So let me just copy it what we have here to make the color white. Then I'll come here and then I'll paste it, right? So when I refresh that page, you can actually see it there, right? You can see the home. So when I tap, you can see the home here, right? So when I tap on the home, it takes me back to the calculator page, right? So basically this is how you can actually, like, this is a very basic calculator app that just does these functionalities, right? Thank you for your time. We do hope you learned a lot and you enjoyed the Flutter course. Do enjoy the rest of your day.